Here we go again. You might be wondering, what are we talking about today? Well, today is going to be layoffs. And you might be asking, who lay off now? And so it turns out that Microsoft had laid out about 6,000 people off of jobs last week, which is kind of insane to me. And before we get into the article, just for fun, I want to take a look at like some layoff trackers. So the first one I came across, which is one I just found interesting, well, it says here that so far in 2025, there have been 310 layoffs at tech companies with 73,250 people impacted, about 520 people per day. In 2024, there were 1,115 layoffs at tech companies with 238,000 people, 461 people impacted, 643 people per day. Do you know how insane that is? Like, I know the numbers, like the amount of people that are affected is kind of insane. Now, I don't know exactly what it was calculating. I just wanted to take a quick look at it because I was genuinely fascinated. But before we get into the layoffs, I just want to look at that because layoffs have been occurring since maybe mid 2022 with mass layoffs. And so it's just ironic that today we're facing something it's just only getting worse. But we'll talk about it soon enough. But I just want to take a look at that and show you guys that. But anyways, so just want to read a little article before we get into it. So here it says here, Microsoft on Tuesday said that it's laying off 3% of employees across all levels, teams, and geographies, affecting about 6,000 people. We continue to implement organizational changes necessary to best position the company for success in a dynamic marketplace, a Microsoft spokesperson said in a statement to CNBC. The company reported better than expected results with 25.8 billion in quarterly net income and an upbeat forecast in late April. Microsoft had 228,000 employees worldwide at the end of June. On Tuesday, Washington State said the company was reducing headcount tied to its Redmond headquarters by 1,985 people, including 1,510 in office. In total, it's likely Microsoft's largest round of layoffs since the elimination of 10,000 roles in 2023. In January, the company announced a small round of layoffs that were performance-based. These new jobs cuts are not related to performance, the spokesperson said. One objective is to reduce layers of management, the spokesperson said. In January, Amazon announced that it was getting rid of some employees after noticing unnecessary layers in its organization. Last week, cybersecurity software provider CrowdStrike announced it would lay off 5% of its workforce. In January, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella told analysts that the company would make sales execution changes after the company delivered slower growth than expected in Azure cloud revenue that wasn't tied to artificial intelligence. Performance in AI cloud growth outdid internal projections. How do you really tweak the incentives go to market? Nadella said, at a time of performance shifts, you kind of want to make sure you lean into even the new design wins. You don't just keep doing the stuff that you did in previous generation. On Monday, Microsoft shares ended trading at $449.26 per share, the highest price so far this year. They closed at a record $467.56 last July. So, quite a lot to take in. Quite a lot to take in. So, naturally, you might be wondering, well, we have our reasoning. It's just that they're making cutbacks. And what people need to understand about companies, especially tech companies, is that when you break it down, they're always looking to try to get a cut or trying to cut corners by some extent. And, the reason why they have so many employees is because, well, during COVID, the world was basically on the back burner and things were slowing down. And so naturally, because of that, what ended up happening is, well, a lot of people were brought onto some of these jobs because, projects weren't moving fast enough. So that's what really happens. And then, well, my throat's killing me. Once COVID kind of ended, projects were getting done, then they said, okay, let's start cutting this stuff out. And it's kind of crazy because even in the article we just read, we saw that Microsoft was actually doing well for itself and it still cut out a bunch of employees. So I hate to say the obvious, but, well, it's basically the CEOs and the higher executives are just lining up their pockets even more than they already are, which is kind of insane to me. Because, to give you some perspective, okay, well, my throat's really bad. When you're because I'm in this field, so I know some stuff. But long story short is that whenever you look at getting into these jobs, especially now, They're looking for a particular set of skills that you need to be proficient in many different languages, and that can take a few years to be proficient in them. And so you get all of that, and you still have a good chance of getting cut. Like, that is the most heartbreaking part, because you go out and get all these qualifications, and then all of a sudden they basically mean nothing. And we're gonna get into like looking for a job later on, but it's just that it's genuinely mind-boggling. And it's not just Microsoft, by the way. It's the whole tech industry is just going out of its way to just slash jobs non-stop just to keep, shareholders and stuff happy. And it's really it's really genuinely depressing, because you'll have people who may work for a company for many years, and then all of a sudden, well, you're getting cut. And so, like, how are you supposed to maintain some job security if you can't even, use the skills you acquired to flourish in whatever company you're getting? So it's genuinely baffling to me. But anyways, I just want to show you guys something a bit more that's even more depressing, unfortunately. So here, essentially, I have this little area, or like the little study, I guess, where it says here also, Microsoft leads count as thousands of U.S. tech workers face layoffs. Well, only a tad over a handful of U.S. tech companies reported job cuts in the last couple of weeks. Those reports added thousands of workers to our layoff tracker tally. Leading the count is Microsoft, which says its plans to pair layers of management will result in approximately 6,000 workers being let go, according to a report from CNBC. The affected workers from across all levels, teams, and geographies. It is unclear how many U.S. workers will be affected. And so essentially there's all stuff like Chegg and Amazon were doing that. But I just want to go to the numbers that were here, because we at the beginning of the video we did a tracker earlier, but I want to see what this one says. And it says here that layoffs during the week ended May 21st, 2025, so as of literally today, at least 6,485 U.S. tech sector employees were laid off or scheduled for layoffs per a Crunchbase News tally. In 2024, at least 95,667 workers at U.S. tech-based companies lost their jobs in 2024, according to a Crunchbase News tally. In 2023, more than 100,091 workers were in U.S.-based tech companies or tech companies with a large U.S. workforce were laid off in mass job cuts, which, by the way, the 2022 between 2023 are probably the most brutal when it came to job cutting. And of course, in 2022, you had 93,000 jobs were slashed from public and private tech companies in the U.S. And you can actually see what companies had the biggest workforce reductions in 2024. You have Intel with 15,000, and Intel, they basically give you they produce not just semiconductors, but they also do semiconductors, probably the best thing to do, and your CPUs, sorry. And so Tesla, of course, everyone knows Tesla cars and stuff. It's that. And Cisco does stuff within networking. And so, in case you want to be curious, okay, well, how did they do this, conduct the study? Well, it says here that this tracker includes layoffs conducted by U.S.-based companies or those with a strong U.S. presence, and is updated at least weekly. We've included both startups and publicly traded tech-heavy companies. We've also included companies based elsewhere that have a sizable team in the U.S., such as Klarna. Even it's unclear how much the U.S. workforce has been affected by layoffs. Layoff and work figures are at best estimates based on reporting. We sourced the layoffs from media reports, our own reporting, social media posts, and layoffs.fyi, a crowdfunded database of tech layoffs. We recently updated our layoffs tracker to reflect the most recent round of layoffs each company has conducted. This allows us to quickly and more accurately track layoff trends, which is why you might notice some changes in our most recent numbers. If an employee headcount cannot be confirmed to our standards, we note it as unclear. So keep in mind, of course, as with any study or with anything that is online, this is not 100% accurate, but we're going to use it as a rule of thumb when it comes to analyzing what's going on within layoffs here. Because, mind you, tech layoffs affect literally everybody, not just the employees. The employees get it probably the worst. Actually, no, they get it the worst. But everybody else gets affected, and I'll explain why in a bit. But I actually want to show you guys something. Okay, so here's what I have here with you guys. So this just shows how much which companies are laying off people, and it's just always being updated all the time. So it's always being updated. It's always being moved around and stuff. So stuff will always be coming in, but naturally when it comes down to it, you get to see who's getting laid off from where. And just because it's not making headlines does not mean it's not happening. As you can see here, even smaller companies are still slashing people or slashing jobs. And it's literally just to keep the status quo, especially for bigger companies. It's just become almost the norm. And I said earlier like that this is bad for everybody because take a look at like we just covered like video game prices like not too long ago, okay? We looked at video game prices and how ridiculous it's been getting because the fact that first of all Microsoft is raising its prices and it's also slashing jobs, which is kind of crazy to me. And for the record, it doesn't matter what the new stuff is. Sometimes people will blame tariffs. Sometimes people will blame economy. It doesn't matter. A company is always going to try to use something as like a scapegoat. So whenever you see stuff like tariffs and stuff, I mean, while they are important, okay, and they are real, your big company is always going to look for a way to use it to their advantage. So if they want to cut jobs and say because tariffs are affecting us, or they want to raise prices because tariffs affect us, that's because that's what they were going to do it anyways. But then they're doing it or finding a reason. So your average person may be like, okay, that's understandable. But if you're somebody who does just a bit of reading, you're like, okay, that doesn't make sense. But anyways, I'm going a bit of a tangent. But back to my whole like stuff like video game stuff, like your video game consoles are becoming more expensive. And by the way, it's not because they're paying their employees too well, okay? They can afford to pay their employees, but it's just taking what's the most like effective. Sorry, not effective. It's taking the most convenient route while keeping the big with the prices as much as possible and don't have to pay as much people because in a business, your employees are your biggest expense. Paying people is your biggest expense every single time. Not manufacturing, not R&D. It's literally paying your employees. So imagine you're a company where you're like, okay, well, we can sell this for this much, make this much money, sell games for, what is it, 80, 90 bucks? We can do that, and we can slash jobs and keep our bonuses. So just practicality at the end of the day. So yeah, that's how a company works. I don't know what else I'm going to tell you. But anyways, I do want to pivot to one more graph that I want to look at, and then we'll move on. And here it says number of tech employees laid off worldwide from 2020 to 2023 by company. So here I just have this graph that explains it from 2020 to 2023. And so this does not account for, of course, 2024 at the time, but it's just if you go to this whole video, you can get a rough estimate of what's been going down, more or less. So I want to take a look here. Like Amazon at the time was leading it at 27,000. Then you had Meta at 21,000, which is kind of insane to think about. You also had Google, Microsoft, Salesforce, Philips, Ericsson, Flink, Uber, Macron, Deli, and so on. Intel only had 995 at the end. That's actually kind of interesting. But then, of course, as time went on, layoffs got bigger. So this has been happening, okay? And I believe that when it comes to especially Meta, they were looking into more AI options. And wow, I actually almost forgot that part. The AI boom, okay? I know it's all doom and gloom, but the AI boom has been a big investment because, especially with ChatGPT coming out, a lot of companies want to have their own ChatGPT. So that's why Google has Gemini, Microsoft has Copilot, and there's one more I'm missing, but there's a lot of other ones that I'm forgetting about. Of course, actually, no, speaking of AI, we also like DeepSeek over there. Like, there's everyone wants a piece of the AI pie, so to speak, because AI automation can cut down a lot of stuff, like cut down a lot of like menial tasks. So when people hear about AI, I don't want to be all doom and gloomy. Most times when an AI is being introduced, it's being introduced in the sense that it's trying to reduce some redundancies. Of course, companies are trying to cut costs, but they're also trying to like pay less so you can get more redundant tasks out the way. That's the whole point. Okay? Because if stuff goes 100% AI, I promise you society is going to collapse tomorrow. Okay? You need coders, you need programmers, you need these kind of people. Okay? Because AI code, if you ever had the pleasure of using it, or at least test it out, it's not always the best. It's helpful for ideas, but it's not always the best. So sometimes you gotta go to the muck and guck and, code yourself, but I don't wanna get too much into that, but here's the point. So yeah, so what we're getting at here, companies cutting corners, what else is new? So now I do wanna point out something new, or not new, but something that's really interesting because like, I find that society as a whole is a bit in like of a catch-22. And the catch-22 is this, okay? Even for minimum wage jobs, especially when I like anecdotally talk to people about it, it's weird that a lot of places will be hiring, especially online. But however, if you actually apply for these places, they're not taking employees. And this happens to big companies as well. And so just like a personal story for me, like for me to look for a job, like the job I have now, I want you to take a guess about how long it took me to find my job. Just take a guess, okay? So I'll give you about maybe 10 seconds to guess, okay? So it took me about eh, let's say it took me about, I'm gonna say 5-6 months to get my job. And when I say 5-6 months, I mean 5-6 months of me aggressively applying to sites almost every day. Actually, I was on LinkedIn, I was on particular websites, I was over here, I was emailing people. Like, I was doing the most, and I only got 2 interviews in my entire time. I want you to take that in. And some people have even worse. I take that in. It is a full-time job to look for a job to try to sustain yourself. So I don't think that's sustainable. But anyways, a little stat I have from last year just says here that more than 70% of job seekers believe that the current labor market is not conducive to landing a new employment opportunity, with job hunters feeling like they have to try harder to find a new job in this economy, according to talent solutions provider Aerotech. Nearly 70% of people said their current job search was more challenging than their last one, which is, anecdotally speaking, I just told you how long it took me to get a new job, so, it's kind of like it is what it is. And so here I have also, like, why has the hiring process become so unbearable? It says here, when the economy and overall mood are positive, businesses generally expedite the hiring process so as to not lose out in the war for talent. Conversely, geopolitical concerns, supply chain disruptions, and high inflation interest rates create a perfect storm of economic turbulence, leading employers to cut back on spending and take a wait-and-see approach when it comes to hiring. So essentially, sometimes you'll have people be like, okay, we're hiring right now, and they'll have your resume like booked for like months, and then you might get a call back later, and then they might try to hire you. And keep in mind too, especially for some of these high level tech jobs, some jobs they take multiple interviews, not just one. So even your interview, technically speaking, is a full-time job as well. So it's just not sustainable. But we'll talk about that later after. It even says here, like, for the employment data, the United States economy added 272,000 jobs. I can't speak English today. In May, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Although more jobs were added last month than predicted, in contrast to April's disappointing numbers, the growth was mainly driven by 3 predominant sectors: healthcare, government, and leisure and hospitality. 42,000 jobs were created in these 3 sectors alone, accounted for more than half of the employment gains in the U.S. The unemployment rate climbed to 4%, first time reaching it has since that level since January 2022. So keep in mind, this is from last year, okay? This is not this year. So my whole point is that the reason, especially now, why layoffs are so bad is because, like, getting laid off already sucks, but it's not like you can just bounce back and find another job. You have to literally be aggressively searching. You have to know the right people, and you gotta have all this experience under your belt, which is kind of insane. Because think about this, right? Even if, say, you want to take a serving job, sometimes in some places, I don't know if it's all that, but sometimes you have to have like a certain certificate. Then you have to have years of experience, and then you might get the job. But also, you might end up being outdone by somebody else who also might have some experience and might also outdo you at the job. So yeah, that's gone level number 1, okay? Level 2, okay? Your application goes through, we win. Now you have to interview. And sometimes you could have the most perfect interview possible and you will still get shut down because maybe they don't need you at the time, or maybe somebody has better qualifications, and then, so yeah. But in this hypothetical, we'll give you this one, all right? Number 3, which is probably the one. You get your job, but now you realize the job sucks. Your job sucks. And so you have 2 options, okay? You leave and go through the same 3 cycles we just talked about again, or you stay in hell and you don't like it, okay? And so that's basically what jobs are right now. It's literally the definition of a catch-22. You are trying to look for a job, okay? And people are saying they want to find you, but when you go and try to get the job, it's not always what it turns out to be, and it turns out they're not hiring, or it might be one of them ghost posting and yada yada yada, and it just feeds itself over and over and over and over and over again. So, in my most humble opinion, I may not be an economist, I may not specialize in this stuff, but let me tell you, there's no way this is going to be sustainable. Because what happens when some of these people end up having to retire, like older people, and you have to bring in new people to be hired in? So, And on top of that, how do you expect people to remain like company loyal when their jobs are at risk of getting slashed, especially in tech? I don't know about other industries as much. I know like layoffs happened across the board, but tech got it especially bad because within technology, stuff is always evolving, stuff is always changing. So there's that. But regardless, my whole point is that there's no way in hell this can be sustainable. I just don't understand. But anyways, I've been rambling on long enough. But point is that yeah, no, I wish you guys the best of luck in your job searches. Okay, I'm telling you firsthand, it's not easy. And all you gotta do is just pray it gets better, because I really don't have anything to tell you. I can tell you fix up your resume. I can tell you practice interviewing skills. I mean, what's more to do, man? But yeah, but point is also like don't ever stop trying. But yeah, hopefully something changes soon. But yeah, there's no way this can keep on going on and on and on and on and on. But alas, if you enjoyed this little video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and follow my social down in the description below. But that's it today. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao, ciao.